The movies. As a man who spent his junior high and high school years in the glory days of the 90s, movie theaters will always hold a special place in my heart. Sadly for me, though, the allure of going to the movies has faded in recent years. Now, I have to be honest and say that for the longest time I felt that was just a byproduct of my own personal situation. Not only am I no longer a member of the main movie theater going demographic, which is 14 to 34-year-olds as far as I understand it, but I've also spent the last 15 years of my life living and working in Japan, which led me to feel that perhaps it was just me losing touch with Western civilization. As it turns out, the more I read up on the current state of cinema in the wider world, it might not just be me. That came to mind the other day while I was watching a segment in the Critical Drinkers Open Bar 94 when the topic turned to the recent Fall Guy film.
This was originally going to be what I led with, but our conversation went in different directions. But yeah, it was talking about the Fall Guy released like a week ago, and it's kind of underperformed, and it's on track to not really make any money for the studios. And people are a little bit perplexed by it because it should have been one of those 4-quadrant movies that kind of pleases everyone. It's an action comedy. It's got Ryan Gosling, who's kind of red hot at the moment in Hollywood. Emily Blunt, who's a very popular actress, a fairly easygoing story, and it came along at that early May release date, which kind of kicks off the summer movie season. And yeah, it's really underperformed. And there was an interesting article that came out from Screen Crush actually saying, "What the hell do people want out of movies now?" And I think that's a pretty good way of phrasing it because there's been a lot of complaints, obviously, in previous years, like, oh my God, stop just churning out superhero movies. Stop giving us remakes. Stop giving us reboots. Stop giving us endless sequels. And okay, this is a movie that hypothetically ticks all the boxes. It's an original IP. It's not a superhero movie. It's not a reboot. It's got, pretty likable stars in it. It's just a generic sort of action comedy. Doesn't try to go into too many other genres. And yet people aren't watching it. And it does make you wonder why. What are they missing here?
I think the line that captured this was where he quotes the article from Screen Crush that asked, "What the hell do people want out of movies now?" This got me thinking to myself, why didn't I go see The Fall Guy? As well as, what would have made me want to go see it? This was actually lingering around in the back of my head for the next several weeks when Open Bar 97 hit and Drinker fired off another marble into the pinball machine of my brain.
Also, just in case you're curious, for movies, you might have heard of this film that was out in 97. It was Titanic. It was the biggest movie of the year at $1.8 billion, which it must have been insane back then. I mean, adjust that for inflation, it's like 20 trillion by today's money. But yeah, that was biggest movie of the year by far. But it was also the year that gave us Jurassic Park: The Lost World, which was a really disappointing follow-up, and I wish they hadn't made it. But never mind, it was okay.
Yeah,
made a lot of money. Men in Black, Tomorrow Never Dies, and Air Force One. That was the top 5 movies of the year.
I know them, yeah.
I mean, I'm kind of surprised Air Force One was in there, to be honest, because, it was a decent action movie, but I didn't think it would be the top 5 for the entire year. But there you go. Apparently it was.
The moment he said it was a decent action movie, suddenly the pinball careened off a barricade and slammed into a half-baked thought that brought us here. Air Force One was a decent action movie with a pretty ridiculous turn-your-brain-off plot, and it was one of the top 5 worldwide box office films of 1997. The Fall Guy, by all accounts online, seems to have also been a decent action movie with a pretty ridiculous turn-your-brain-off plot, and it seems to have failed to meet expectations and certainly won't be near the top of the box office performance list for 2024. Not that any film that does achieve that honor should likely brag about it, it seems. Furthermore, I can actually recall seeing Air Force One in the theaters because 1997 was a landmark year for going to the movies for me, and I have a weirdly vivid recollection of a lot of movies I saw that year. Why? It was the year I got my driver's license. And a girlfriend, who liked making out in movie theaters. I would apologize for that, but let's be honest. Movies are enough to make villains out of the best of men. Truthfully though, we mostly made out in the car. No, okay, sorry, I'll stop now. So this led me to mashing the two questions together. Why did I go see Air Force One in 1997 but had no desire to go see The Fall Guy in 2024? This isn't trying to equate the two movies, despite the construction of the question, but I think it might touch on some basic points that coincide with the changing state of movie theaters around the world. So let's make the question more general and apply it to myself in the hopes that it might actually apply to some of you. Why did I go see nearly anything Hollywood pooped out in the 90s, but go to the theaters very rarely now? Before I launch into what I think are the most significant factors in answering these questions, I should point out 2 other potential contributors. First, as I said at the start, I'm no longer a member of the primary movie-going demographic. As a dusty old grumpy-ass 44-year-old, I am now that old fart sitting on the porch yelling about the new generation walking all over my grass. So, there's that. Second, it's been brought to my attention recently that the only reason I feel the 80s and 90s films were good is because I consumed them before my brain was fully developed, thus my affection for them is based on the fact that I was, in effect, brain damaged when I watched them. I do not agree with this interpretation, but I think it can be potentially distilled down to the idea that young people have terrible taste in, well, everything. Again, not sure that I agree, but I will at least concede it's possible. So, maybe the reason I went and saw Air Force One was due to a lethal combination of being part of the main movie theater going demographic and my utter lack of discerning taste in films due to my youth and potential brain damage. And I elected not to see The Fall Guy because I am now an old grumpy bastard who is too ancient to partake in that nonsense due to my better taste? More discerning taste? I don't know, man. My wife and I watched The Meg 2 last night and I had a blast. I mean, Jason Statham kills a megalodon by stabbing it in the mouth with a helicopter blade. Maybe I still have brain damage. Still, it's possible these two things contributed to why I saw Air Force One in the theater and I had no desire to see The Fall Guy, but I don't think that really accounts for most or even half the equation in my mind. For me, it has more to do with three primary issues that are becoming worse as time goes on. First, let's talk about ticket prices. Now, I grew up in Southern California, San Diego to be exact, and in the year of our Lord 1997, the average price for a movie theater ticket was around $4.50. In fact, the main thing my girlfriend and I would do on the weekends was to try and see the matinee shows at the Trolley Theater in Grossmont because the first two showings of the day were half price, meaning we saw most of our movies for $2.50. The reason 1997 ended up being such a momentous year in movies for me was that both my girlfriend and I collected our movie stubs and made collages out of them. No, it's pathetic. And I can distinctly recall we ended up seeing Titanic 22 times in the theater. Again, like I said, boobies. I cannot stress that point enough. But realistically, because we were always going to the matinee shows, 22 viewings of Titanic cost us around $60 each. Now, let's flip this around. I am currently living in Yokohama and the current average price for a movie theater ticket is around 1,424 yen. Now I'm going to use the 100-to-1 conversion for yen here just to make it easier. Right now the yen is in the tank because the economy of Japan was stabbed in the gut by the Fukushima earthquake and then had its head lopped off by COVID. But all that aside, for a permanent resident of the country whose income is based on that shit economy, it's not like I'm making US dollars to pay for my tickets. So long story long, 1,424 yen could be translated to $14. A quick internet search tells me that seems to be the average price in California at the moment as well, so we'll go with that. Furthermore, I can use my recent trip to the theater to see Godzilla Minus One and Dune 2 to support this. The base ticket price is 2,000 yen, or $20. If I want to go see things in IMAX, it's an extra 1,000 yen, so now $30. So I had to see both films on a Tuesday during the first showing of the day, and I needed to join the frequent moviegoer club at the theater, and my ticket went down to 2,200 yen, or $22. So if I wanted to see The Fall Guy in standard definition, didn't mind going on the least busy day, and was fine with watching it at 9:30 in the morning, I could have probably gotten a ticket for around $14. Now, let's take a moment and appreciate that I could have seen Air Force One 5.5 times for that same price, assuming I made all the same concessions. In my mind, the price of my Godzilla ticket means that there were 4 other films that I had to skip. The Fall Guy then falls into the skip category. I think this is part of the reason why movies like The Fall Guy will continue to fail at the box office. The movie ticket prices have gotten too high to justify seeing those movies we used to look at and think, well, this isn't going to knock my socks off, but it'll be fun enough. Why not? Nothing about either Air Force One or The Fall Guy jumps out as, ooh, this is going to be epic, but those films still sold tickets back in the 90s because the investment wasn't as high. Now, I heard someone state recently that ticket prices being what they are is a weak argument.
The power of having films in the cinemas is shifting away from the cinema. Plus the fact that if you take your family to the cinema, you're coughing up £100 just to bloody
I
see a
don't
movie.
buy that argument, in all honesty. Like, there's plenty of cinemas that have like the monthly offers where you can get discounted tickets, you can get free tickets, unlimited showings. You don't have, like, it even gives you discounts on all the concessions. If people are willing to spend like $40 on Kylie Jenner lip gloss, I can believe that they'll spend the money to take their family to the fucking cinema. So I don't buy that shit whatsoever.
To this I would say, and I cannot believe these words are going to come out of my mouth, but it depends on the level of satisfaction one derives from their Kylie Jenner lip gloss, and how often they have been disappointed by their Kylie Jenner lip gloss in recent years. Furthermore, and more importantly, the real question is, do they have access to a service filtered straight into their own home to which they are already paying at least $10 a month that would provide them with a comparable lip gloss or even the same exact Kylie Jenner lip gloss if they just waited about 20 days for it to be delivered to their house? I really hope that is the last time I ever need to utter the words Kylie Jenner lip gloss, and thankfully this brings me to point number 2. In 1997, when Air Force One hit the theaters, the alternatives in terms of entertainment were extremely limited. The internet was still in its infancy during those days, and the majority of people had dial-up at best. Even with that wondrous innovation, there was no YouTube, no Netflix, no streaming services of any kind. Nada. Furthermore, not being Richie Rich in 1997, the TV screen was laughable by today's standards, and the sound system, while not awful, was certainly not comparable to what a lot of people have in their homes now. So, if you didn't want to see a movie in the theater, your options were to watch whatever was on cable TV, to which you had no control over the content, watch something on pay-per-view, which had limited options, or you had to go to my childhood wonderland, Blockbuster Video. Quick aside, I'll never forget the weekend in 1992 when my mom was away somewhere and my dad and I were sitting around the house trying to find something to watch and failing, so we went to Blockbuster only to be disappointed once again, so we finally decided to go to the theater and see Steven Seagal's Under Siege. We then left the theater and went back to Blockbuster and rented the entire Seagal backlog and had a grand old time watching Steven Seagal beat ass for the next several hours. That was a great weekend. Nowadays, however, human beings are quite literally spoiled for options. You can get on the internet and log into any number of streaming services for around $12 and get access to thousands of movies and TV shows that you can watch on your personal home theater. Now, I know not everyone has a huge plasma screen TV and stereo surround, but a lot of people do. Well, a lot more than they did in the 90s, that's for sure. There's also YouTube, which is free, and has almost limitless entertainment that you can choose that might be tailor-made to your tastes. Thus, while my dad and I had to trek all the way to Blockbuster only to find all the new releases gone, now you can just sit your butt on the couch and pull up the newest releases on your smartphone, your laptop, your tablet, your plasma screen TV, and your iWatch, and all at the same time, and watch them in 5D or whatever. I mean, I was literally the movie guy in my high school because I was the kid with the massive VHS collection. People came to my place on the weekends not because I was cool or popular, but because I was the discount Blockbuster. Even then, I had maybe 300 total VHS tapes. Netflix has over 4,000 movies and nearly 2,000 TV shows, and that is just one of the many streaming services people can choose from. I mean, there's Amazon Prime, Apple TV, Hulu, Disney Minus. No, I will not call anything churning out that garbage they make as plus. You have to earn that plus, sir. And the list goes on. Why would you really need to leave the house to find something to watch with access to all that? This leads me to my final point as well, which is that the incredible speed that things are moving from the movie theater to digital media has also contributed to a decrease in the urgency of seeing a film in the theater. Air Force One hit the theater on July 25th, 1997, and the VHS version of the movie did not hit rental stores until February 10th, 1998. That is 7 months and some change between the theater release and home access. The Fall Guy, on the other hand, hit theaters on May 3rd, 2024 and was available for digital access on, drumroll please, May 21st, 2024. 18 days. We only needed to wait 18 days and then we could just watch it at home. Bringing this back around to the Kylie Jenner lip gloss, oh damn it, I said it again. What if you just had to wait 18 days and you could get access to that same lip gloss as part of a monthly service you were already paying for? Would you still shell out the $40 to get it directly from the store? Probably not, which in earnest is why this is not an apples to apples comparison. I get it though. The line of thinking follows the if you're willing to spend money on X stupid thing, you should be willing to spend money on Y stupid thing. But consumption on some levels is about how it engages our endorphins, or what kind of happy it's bringing into our lives, and if there's a comparable thing we can replace it with that might trigger the same level of happy without needing to spend so much money on it. These three things are the main factors that have led to me going to the theater much less often than I used to. The ticket prices are much higher, there's a lot more access to entertainment direct from my home, where I have a much better entertainment setup than when I was younger, and the amount of time I need to wait before I can watch it at home has been reduced to almost nothing. So to sum up, I watched Air Force One in the theater because the tickets were cheap. There were a lot fewer options for entertainment in those days, and the amount of time I would have had to need to wait to see it at home was much longer. On the other hand, I didn't see The Fall Guy because the tickets are much more expensive. I'm already paying for at least one streaming service a month. I get most of my entertainment from YouTube now, and I knew I would not have to wait more than 2 months to just watch it at home. These three factors, in my opinion, are what is hurting the middle-of-the-road films that people used to go and watch through to the early 2000s. I would say the same basic logic applies to things like Furiosa. It looked like a decent action flick, and if I assumed the action was on par with Fury Road, that would have been a good sign. But the problem is it's a spin-off of an IP that was ultimately an insult to the fans of the IP because they put a Mad Max saga in the title without really putting Mad Max in it. I mean, that would have been like making a movie titled Miss Moneypenny, a James Bond saga, and then not putting James Bond in the movie. But I digress. I should, however, point out some other factors that might have played a part in how these two films performed outside of what I highlighted above, just so I don't appear to be too overly reductive. First, with Air Force One. What can we assume the executives building this film might have believed would be the significant predictors of its performance? I would guess the primary factor would have been Harrison Ford, because this was a time when Hollywood star power was still a thing. Furthermore, it was an espionage thriller starring Harrison Ford. If we look back, Patriot Games, the first of the two Jack Ryan films starring Ford, was released in 1992, then Clear and Present Danger was released in 1994. Both of those films were critical and financial successes, so putting Ford into Air Force One might have intrigued all the people who enjoyed those other two films. In fact, I have had to correct more than one person who held the false recollection that Air Force One was a Jack Ryan story. Thus, I think this movie might have been trying to bank on the momentum Harrison Ford built up in those two films. Competition-wise, in July of 1997, the main films it competed with when it released were Men in Black 1, Face Off, a legendary film, Contact, Disney's animated Hercules, My Best Friend's Wedding, and George of the Jungle. Only George of the Jungle and Contact were released in the same month as Air Force One, meaning July, and the others were all holdovers from the previous month. The only other films of note released in July of 1997 were Out to Sea and Nothing to Lose. Air Force One actually held the top box office earning spot in August, where Conspiracy Theory, a Mel Gibson-Julia Roberts thriller that has completely disappeared from my memory, Spawn, a film that I dearly love, Copland, Picture Perfect, G.I. Jane, Event Horizon. Shout out to the Critical Drinker on this one, I agree, this film is highly underrated. Money Talks, How to Be a Player, Mimic, Hoodlum, and The Full Monty were released. Finally, in September, where Air Force One dropped to number 7 in the domestic box office, The Game, one of my favorite Fincher films, In and Out, Fire Down Below, oh, Steven Seagal, The Peacemaker, LA Confidential, Wishmaster, Soul Food, and The Edge were released. Now, if we want an action film with a good lead that is not necessarily the greatest plot in the world, but is a fun movie, what was Air Force One's competition? Men in Black, Conspiracy Theory, I guess, but I have a feeling that movie sucked something awful because I remember nothing about it, Fire Down Below, and The Peacemaker. I think I'm going to bank on Harrison Ford in that mix. So I think all of these factors contributed to why Air Force One was able to perform better than people might remember it actually being. As to the other factors working against The Fall Guy, I think there are a couple that stick out. First, what do we assume the studio thought might sell this film? I'm guessing it was Ryan Gosling, Emily Blunt, the IP, and that it's a no-brainer action flick released around the Memorial Day weekend. Here's the problem. If we look at the 18 major films Ryan Gosling starred in, starting with The Notebook in 2004, his top 5 earning films as determined by the reported worldwide box office according to Box Office Mojo minus the reported budget of the film were Barbie, La La Land, Blade Runner 2049, Crazy Stupid Love, and The Notebook. So, a comedy drama, a musical romantic drama, a sci-fi film, a romantic comedy, and a romantic drama. Do you see the pattern? If we remove Blade Runner 2049 because, despite what it made, it is considered a box office bomb, all of his most successful films are some form of romantic story. In fact, the only critically and financially successful action film Gosling has ever starred in was Drive back in 2011. I would argue this indicates that Ryan Gosling is much more of a woman's actor than a man's actor. What I mean by that is that the ladies sure do love him, it seems, and he fits well in romantic films, but I have yet to meet a single dude in my life that ever uttered the sentence, "Man, Gosling's in that, let's go, bro." He is a pretty boy. I mean, the fact that he played Ken, I think, sums this up. He is Ken, the boy toy that all the girls wish they could play with, and that's great, they can have him. But this is problematic when you consider that the studio was likely counting on familiarity with the IP selling the film. Why? Because fans of the original IP, such as myself, were quite fond of Lee Majors, the $6 Million Man, who played Colt Seavers in the original Fall Guy television show back in the 80s. And Ryan Gosling does not project the same level of masculinity that Majors did. I mean, Majors was a man's man, a real macho dude. If you need proof of this, let's take a moment and bask in one of my favorite Lee Majors cameo moments from the opening of the Bill Murray Scrooged film.
It's Lee Majors!
Psycho sees Santa's workshop, and only Lee Majors can stop them. The night the reindeer die.
One of my other favorite things about the Fall Guy TV show was the theme song, which Majors actually sang. I wish I could play it, but copyright. I'll link it in the description though, so you can go and bask in the glory of wonderful 80s theme song magic. The recent film version got Blake Shelton to sing it, which I get why. It would have been interesting though if they would have found an actor that had the talent and willingness to actually sing it. I think that would have been a fun connection to make with the old TV show. I'm going to try and make a comparison here, and while the complaints are not exactly the same, I feel the problem with Gosling playing Colt Seavers is within the same ballpark of the problem created by the original Tom Cruise version of Jack Reacher. Cruise is a great actor and a phenomenal action film star, quite possibly one of the best. But he just wasn't Jack Reacher, and no matter how well he could project the action hero, he did not have the physical presence and masculinity needed to be Jack Reacher. So they rethought the concept and made it exponentially better in the Amazon TV series by paying more attention to matching up the best possible actor to represent the look and feel of the character. I don't think anyone would argue Alan Ritchson is a better action star than Tom Cruise, but he is a far better Jack Reacher. In the same vein, Ryan Gosling is a good actor, but he isn't Colt Seavers, and I don't think I'm the only fan of the old Fall Guy TV show that thought this. Thus, the film was potentially hurt by casting Gosling for two reasons. He's more successful in romantic films than he is in action films, and his casting as Colt likely split the fans of the IP at best. Finally, we have Emily Blunt. I will never speak an ill word about Emily Blunt. She is an incredibly versatile actress who has proven adept at playing a wide range of roles. Action role-wise, she was amazing as Rita Vertasky in Edge of Tomorrow, as well as the out-of-depth Kate in Sicario. A Quiet Place is more horror than action, I think, but she was also excellent in that. So she's been in several action films that were both critically and financially successful. In the end, I think Emily Blunt represents a net positive for the film, but the film is called The Fall Guy, thus she's not even meant to be carrying the film, but serving as a supplementary factor, and her impact on the ticket sales is therefore more tertiary. So, to sum up, why didn't people go see the turn your brain off action film The Fall Guy in 2024? 1. Movie theater ticket prices have outpriced this kind of middle-of-the-road action film. 2. There are far too many other forms of entertainment that people have streaming into their home, which further lessens the desire to make the investment in movie theater prices for a movie that is only potentially above average. 3. The movie was likely going to be available to stream from home within a month. 4. Ryan Gosling is less successful and bankable as an action star. 5. Ryan Gosling is also not a good fit to stand in for Lee Majors, which likely damaged the potential draw from fans of the original IP. Then, speaking only for myself, it's also because I'm too old and not part of the main theater crowd anymore. Although, I would like to point out, if the studio was hoping to draw in fans of the IP, you needed us old geezers. I mean, that show ran from 1981 to 1986. Assuming you need to be at least 6 years old to remember the show in 1986, you'd had to have been born in 1980, right? Which would put you in your early 40s. Thus, the studio must have been hoping for some of us fossils to get up off the porch, slap in our best dentures, and fork over some of our hard-earned bucks. Finally, why did people go and see the turn your brain off action film Air Force One in 1997? 1. The movie theater ticket prices were less than half what they are now. 2. We had very limited options in terms of entertainment at home. 3. The movie wasn't going to be available to watch at home for more than half a year if we missed it in the theater. 4. Harrison Ford was a very bankable asset at the time. 5. Harrison Ford had also made a name for himself in several quite popular espionage thrillers in the years prior to this film. Finally, once again, speaking only for myself, I was a member of the main movie theater going crowd at that time, and I had brain damage. Have brain damage. Well, it's all the same. My taste in films was bad, is the point. It still is, really, but that's neither here nor there. And with all that, I shall bring this rambling mess to a close. Thank you for listening this far. I'd love to hear what you all think, or if you feel similarly about going to the movie theaters, down in the comments as well. So until next time, always remember that he had no coconut to my knowledge.
He says to Miss Cochran here, "Baby, up your butt with a coconut." I think he was prepared to do it. Except I saw no coconut. He had no coconut to my knowledge.